There's a moment when everything goes wrong at once that strips away every version of yourself you've been performing. The car won't start. The pipe under the sink starts spraying at midnight. The file corrupts an hour before the deadline. And before anyone says a word, you can already tell who's who in the room. Some people curse, some freeze. Some start looking around for whoever seems like they might have an answer. And then there's that one person who does something strange. They go quiet. Not checked out quiet, not panicked quiet. Something different. Their eyes are moving. Something is running behind them. And then, almost without saying anything to anyone, they just start doing something about it. And you're standing there with this odd mix of relief and something almost embarrassing, like, what is wrong with me that my first instinct was to look for an exit? Most people assume that person is smarter, or grew up with someone who taught them this, or has just seen enough of life that nothing rattles them. But the real answer is stranger than all of that. And once you understand it, you won't just see other people differently. You'll start to understand things about yourself that have probably been sitting in the background for a long time. Let's start with what's actually happening in those first few seconds. When most people hit a broken situation, the nervous system reads it as a threat. Uncertainty equals danger. The brain immediately looks for an exit or a rescuer. That's not weakness. That's just the system doing what it was built to do. But the person who goes quiet, something different is happening in them. The uncertainty isn't landing as danger. It's landing as interesting. That difference doesn't come from personality. It comes from a very specific kind of history. Psychologist Albert Bandura spent years studying what he called self-efficacy, the specific, felt sense that this kind of problem is one you can affect, not necessarily solve affect. And he found that this belief changes everything. How long someone stays with a hard problem, how much effort they put in when it gets frustrating, whether difficulty reads as a signal to stop or a signal to adjust. But the most important thing he found, you don't build this by being told you're capable. You build it by doing something and having it work. He called these mastery experiences, and they're smaller than you'd think. You wiggled the cable and the monitor came back. You called the number you'd been avoiding and it turned out fine. You read the manual nobody else touched. The win doesn't have to be big. What changes is the moment right after, when your brain quietly updates its picture of what you're capable of. And there's something interesting about how that knowledge gets stored. Ask someone who's been fixing things for years how they knew something was wrong, and they'll pause. It just felt off, they'll say. They're not being vague. That knowledge doesn't live in words. It lives in the hands, in the sound a healthy engine makes versus one about to fail. It comes from repetition, failure, and the specific silence that follows when something finally works. Think about the first time you fixed something yourself. Not watch someone else do it, you did it. And there was a moment right after that felt different, not triumphant, just, oh, okay, I can do that. That moment shifts something. The world moves from something that happens to you to something you can reach into and change. But not everyone who became a fixer took the same road. Some built this through what psychologists call scaffolding. Adults who handed them space instead of answers. I don't know either. Let's open it up and see. That kid learns mistakes are data, not disasters. Broken things become interesting. Confidence gets built through curiosity. And then there's the other path. The kid who learned to fix things because there was simply no one else. At 7 years old, figuring out dinner because waiting wasn't an option. Patching the bike tire because nobody was coming. Learning early that helplessness had real consequences. And somewhere inside, making a quiet, permanent decision. I will always find a way through. One path feels like play. The other feels like survival. But from the outside, they produce the same thing. Someone who doesn't back away. But here's where it gets complicated. Because you'd think that someone who grew up either way, through curiosity or through survival, would eventually feel safe, would eventually be able to put the tools down. Some of them do. But some of them never quite figure out how to stop, because this looks like confidence from the outside. But underneath, something else entirely is running. Some people who can fix anything, practically, emotionally, logistically, for everyone around them, learn to do it from a place that has nothing to do with strength. They learned because helplessness was never safe. Maybe being useful was the only currency that bought them stability. Maybe the one time they couldn't fix something, the fallout was bad enough that something in them decided, never again. So they became the person who handles everything. And from the outside, that looks like a superpower. But ask them to step back and let someone else handle something. Just once, and watch what happens. They hover. They offer suggestions nobody asked for. They cannot relax until they've confirmed it's being done right. Because for them, an unfixed thing doesn't just feel like a problem. It feels like a threat to something much deeper. Someone put it simply once, and it stayed with me. I can fix everything except myself. And the reason that lands so hard is because it points at something real, that for some people, fixing was never about the broken thing. It was about managing something that had no other outlet, worth sitting with. And then there's the other kind, the one who fixes things because broken things genuinely fascinate them. Not to prove anything, not because helplessness is terrifying, but because the gap between not working and working is one of the most interesting places in the world to them. These people will take apart something they already fixed just to understand it better. When you ask, "Can you do that?" they say without hesitation, "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." And here's the thing about both types, the one who fixes out of survival and the one who fixes out of curiosity. Neither of them is afraid of being wrong. What they're afraid of is not trying. Failure, to them, isn't a verdict. It's just information. It's the thing that tells you which direction to adjust. That's the real gap. Not skill, not experience, just a different relationship to what it means to get something wrong. Researchers call the broader trait tolerance of ambiguity, the ability to sit inside an unresolved situation without falling apart. People who struggle with this need resolution fast. When they can't get it, anxiety takes over. The fixer learned, somewhere early, that the uncomfortable in-between isn't the end. It's the middle. And the middle is where everything actually happens. One last thing worth naming. When you fix something real, not a spreadsheet, not a meeting, something real, the feedback is absolute. It works or it doesn't. Nobody tells you later that your fix was good, but your approach was off. That kind of clarity is genuinely rare. Most of what fills our days lives in a fog of subjective evaluation. Did the presentation land? Hard to say. Was that the right call? Depends who you ask. But something that wasn't working and now is? That's not a matter of opinion. For people who spend most of their time in ambiguous, hard-to-measure environments, which is most of us, that feeling of undeniable rightness resets something. This is why someone overwhelmed by everything in their life will disappear into the garage for a few hours. It looks like avoidance, but often it's the opposite. They're rebuilding the one thing the week took from them, the experience of effort meaning something real. And here's what's always struck me about this. Talk to almost anyone who really knows how to fix things, and somewhere in their story you'll find the same line. I figured it out because I couldn't afford not to, or too stubborn to ask, or just refused to stay stuck. The starting point is almost never noble, but the starting point almost doesn't matter, because whether someone began out of necessity, curiosity, or stubbornness, they all end up building the same thing. The deep operating belief that outcomes are shaped by their own effort. Not luck, not other people, them. If you watched this and felt like the fixer, you probably already knew some of this, even without words for it. If you watched it and felt more like the person scanning the room for someone else to step in, that's not a flaw. It's a history. And history isn't permanent. It changes the same way it was built. One small moment of trying something and having it actually work. Not a car. Not a crisis. Just the call you'd been avoiding. The thing you'd been pretending wasn't broken. You looked at it. You didn't wait. One attempt. That's the first brick. Because the person who walks into the broken room and goes quiet, they feel the same uncertainty you feel. The same not knowing. What's different is that the not knowing doesn't land as a verdict. It lands as a beginning. Before you go, which one are you? The one who moves toward the broken thing, the one who backs away, or the one who fixes everything for everyone else, but quietly doesn't know how to fix what's going on inside? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video made you stop and think, that's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe, because the next one goes somewhere I don't think you'll expect. See you there.